My name is Christina, and I'm an adult child of divorce. I wanted to come on here and share my experience because experiencing your parents' divorce as an adult, it kind of allows you to be put in the middle, especially if you're close with your parents. Personally, I was very close with both my parents. Truthfully, being friends with my parents made their divorce 10 times harder than it needed to be on me. Without further ado, I should probably provide some trigger warnings that my story entails drug abuse, escorts, and death. Now that we have our trigger warnings out of the way, my story starts in 2018, specifically around a table with my mom and her close friends, celebrating her birthday and listening to some really weird country music. One song came on and my mom started bursting out in tears, and I was kind of like, whoa, I know my grandparents just moved in with you, but do we really need the waterworks? Obviously, it wasn't my grandparents' presence that was affecting my mom's mental health. It was essentially being married to my dad. Why? My mom one day decided to pick up my dad's tablet and go through it, and she found out that he had been having many affairs for many years. This greatly affected my mom. However, she tried to stay. She wanted my dad to be sober. She wanted my dad to stop having affairs. They went to couple counseling, but I personally had enough in February of 2019 where I said, hey, Mom, let's get you out of there. I don't trust this guy. So just come and move in with me and we'll figure it out from there. She thought it was a bad idea. I thought it was a pretty good idea. It wasn't necessarily the best idea I've ever had, but surely I learned a lot from it. My mom moved in 2019 with me and hit some rough patches. My mom was very hyper vigilant. She was coming out of a very traumatic experience. At the time, I didn't really understand that. I mean, I did. It was hectic. And I wouldn't want any of what happened to her to happen to me. I was living with my mom. My dad was 6 hours away. They were still fighting and figuring out what they wanted to do with the rest of their life. I wasn't necessarily sure what was my dad's agenda. So I went up in May of 2019 to get down to the bottom of it. My partner at the time and I went and visited my dad, and I had asked him just to be honest with me. And my dad was very honest about spending $60,000 on the white stuff alone, where they go skiing with their nose. I don't know what's allowed or what's not allowed on this app. So my dad was open about having affairs, open about his use of substances. And he told me he had an opioid addiction, told me everything that he did wrong in the marriage, but also kind of gave a why this happened. And it was more or less childhood trauma that he was never able to work through or get over. So it just led him down a very nasty path. End of 2019, I had decided to move in with my ex-partner, and we lived. I took a step away from my relationship with my mom for a short time because it was just a lot of pressure. My mom didn't realize that she was driving us away. The way that my mom treated me was very hard, and we have since worked through it, and I am no longer super triggered, or we've just worked through stuff. Between 2020 to 2023, it was probably the most hardest years of my life. I had to go back and forth and trying to get the story straight. My mom would tell me one thing, my dad would tell me another. My dad took literally no responsibility. He told everybody that my mom was taking all of his paycheck, but in reality, my dad had worked out a system with the payroll in his company to put a certain amount of percentage into his pension, but also a certain amount of money into his TFSA. With this, they were able to only provide my mom a certain amount of his paycheck on paper. Essentially, there's a lot of really, really shitty things that you can do to get away from your responsibilities and your obligations to a court of law. Anywho, so my father had told everybody he was broke. My mom was running him dry, even though he only gave her about 30% of his paycheck. It looked like he was only getting $1,200 every paycheck, not knowing that at the time. My father was giving everybody a sob story, and he made twice, if not more, his salary by what people were giving him because they felt pity for him. In 2021, my father had visited us, and one thing that I will never forget is when he was leaving, he said goodbye like I always did. But when I came back upstairs to our apartment, my ex-partner at the time said he was 100% on drugs. And I said, no, my father and I just smoked a joint. He was actually on drugs. In 2022, my father and my mother's separation was still very prominent. It was a hot topic. My mom was not allowed to blog about it because my dad's got a subpoena on her blog to talk from talking about him. However, things never changed. Things were hectic. My dad got cancer. There was a brief stint of my dad faking cancer in 2020, but no, he actually had full-on cancer. My father wanted to get through it. He finally found the motivation to live. Throughout this process, I was by my father's side. I never once felt the need to ask him why he did this or why he did that, because I really, at the end of the day, didn't care. I knew that he put himself in this situation because he didn't care. There is so much to this story where I look back and I feel so naive because I had really disrupted my relationship with my mom because I chose to believe my dad. Even despite all of the evidence that my mom had provided me at the time, I just felt so confused. That has been such a prominent thing in this journey of being an adult child of divorce, is that it is such a confusing situation to be in because one, you thought your family was going to be together forever, but in reality, there's no way in hell it would have lasted forever. In August of 2022, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. I had been back and forth seeing my dad a lot more frequently than I had before. We moved him to be with my brother and my nephew so we could just stay close with my dad. Pretty much given a end of life diagnosis between like 3 to 6 months at the time, and my dad just wanted to really fight through it, so he moved in with my brother. And until my dad started slipping up and talking about things while he was in that process, where I started to actually piece together the truth and started to come to my own realizations and conclusions of I've been absolutely bamboozled by my father this whole time. I thought my mom was number one enemy, but in reality, I'm seeing all of these things that happened. And my father passed away, ironically, on my parents' 29th wedding anniversary. My dad was always consistent when it came to ruining whenever their anniversary landed on Mother's Day. So, of course, in father fashion, my father passed away on their anniversary, which landed on Mother's Day. Afterwards, I can only tell you it gets a lot worse before it got better. My father's death caused such a rift in the family, even to the point where when my father's brother saw my mom, he was like, shoo, shoo, like a little baby. Anyways, we kicked him out of the celebration of life and moved on with our lives. What I found out after my dad's death has shook me to my core. Shit got real. An adult child of divorce, you experience things and you take on things that you shouldn't necessarily take on. I want to talk about this experience. I want to talk about my own revelations throughout this whole process because let me tell you, there is a lot. For now, that is how I became an adult child of divorce with a dead dad now. I know it's not necessarily the most craziest or dramatic story that you probably listened to. However, I'm telling you, if you stay tuned, there might be a lot more things to uncover about this story. So that was just a quick little story time, and we'll catch you on the next. Bye for now.